Thank you, Chairman and distinguished members. My name is Charlie Spies. I'm in the political law practice at the Dickinson Wright law firm and have spent the past 25 years as an attorney in the election law arena. I've served as counsel to the chairman of the FEC, election law counsel for the RNC, counsel to the DC Republican Party, and have done election law work in over 30 states. My wife and I are DC residents, and I've worked on multiple challenges before the DC Board of Elections. If we can get reforms correct in DC, it will be a model for states around the nation. We are facing a crisis of voter confidence in this country, with polls demonstrating that 37% of Democratic-leaning voters and 71% of Republican-leaning voters share concerns about the election system. I want to be very clear. Free, fair, secure, well-run, and transparent elections are a cornerstone of, and certainly not a threat to, democracy. Laws that create safeguards to ensure every legal vote is counted and increase transparency are not, to quote inflammatory rhetoric, so-called Jim Crow 2.0. Effective election integrity efforts are not tedious, but instead they are important to increase confidence in our electoral process, which also results in increased voter participation. Georgia and Florida recently passed common sense reforms similar to the ACE Act here, and the result has been more participation and more confidence in the outcome of their elections. The ACE Act will implement basic election reforms while also supporting states' rights to manage their own election processes by making DC into a model for fair, secure, and transparent elections. The two key principles of the ACE Act that will improve voter confidence are tools to make elections more effectively run and making elections more transparent. Locally, the challenges with the administrations of elections in DC have been outlined by the chairman and Mr. Cuccinelli. The second component to improve voter confidence is transparency, which must include meaningful observation of all aspects of the voting process. Multiple states recently used the pretext of COVID to thwart election observation efforts, and when you don't let poll workers see what's happening, then they aren't going, or you don't have security or cameras on drop boxes, then people are going to question the process. Transparency demonstrates that the process works and uncovers issues to be remedied in a timely manner. For example, Florida saw huge electoral turnout across all demographics in 2022 after implementing similar reforms to the ACE Act, and that should be our goal with DC reforms also. The ACE Act contains numerous provisions to ensure DC elections are well-run and transparent, cleaning up voter rolls, adding voter ID requirements, prohibiting ballot harvesting, ending non-citizen voting, and expanding effective election observation. Despite dishonest and divisive cries of voter suppression, the American people overwhelmingly support common sense reforms like this to the election process. Most of the reforms in the ACE Act have been tried in Florida and Georgia, and Florida's SB 90 was a model for many of these of the safeguards. The fact is that in Florida, despite assertions of suppression, in 2022, turnout among all demographics was up, and the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit recently upheld the challenge provisions of it. The same can be said about Georgia. After Senate Bill 202 was signed into law, Georgia received national backlash, but the reality is that Georgia saw record-breaking turnout last November, and a University of Georgia survey of voters taken after the elections found that exactly 0% of Black respondents reported a poor voting experience. I'm focused on Florida and Georgia because the ACE Act is based upon their common sense reforms, and by bringing those here to Washington, D.C., we can use it as a model for reform around the country. Thank you for the invitation to discuss the opportunity to use D.C. as the model for electoral reform, and I look forward to answering your questions.